How is everyone doing? It is myself, Jeff Black, my good buddy, Brandon DeCruz. We're back for another episode of Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast, episode 63. So today we're going to talk about optimizing your sleep routine, from nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement interventions for getting the perfect night of sleep. That's hard to do for a lot of people. Sleep tends to be the biggest obstacle for people to really kind of like make happen consistently. So we're going to kind of dive into it. But first, let's get into our last 7 days. So I'll take the helm on this one. Last 7 days was good. The kids took me out for Father's Day, went to
Oh
Texas
yeah.
Roadhouse, and I had a cookie slice from Great American Cookie.
Good for you, my man.
Yeah, Jay told me to have a meal, but so it wrecked me though. I felt awful because I've been eating at home, so I'm used to controlling all the oils and all the things
Absolutely.
like that. And
You
you
know,
just,
I don't even deviate. Even when I go out to eat, I always ask,
I know.
listen, can you leave oil and butter off? Just because I know how sensitive my stomach is to like the refined and not only refined oils, but the refried oils.
Right. And but it was a great dinner. It was a good time. I gotta, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I'm gonna have a man moment here with you that I'm a pretty transparent guy, but a few months ago, me and my oldest son had a conversation, and it was a conversation based upon I did not like the way his life was kind of being going and the leadership he was kind of getting from his mom and just some of the choices. So him and I kind of had a falling out, and sadly he didn't say anything to me for Father's Day. So it was kind of one of those. It was great in so many ways, but it had a bummer moment to it because it was my first time in 17 years. I hadn't seen or heard from my kid on Father's Day, and it had nothing other to do than just stuff his mom can't let go of from years ago, and she's going through her own divorce. But other than that, man, I will say my the lady I'm dating, her daughter and Keegan just did a great job. So, for every good thing, there's always a bad thing, I said. And I will say overall, it was a different Father's Day, but it was a great one. Business has been good. I'm starting to get more competitors. I really like working with competitors, like male competitors, especially like the 30 and the 40 and the 50-year-olds who kind of like want to do weird shit or into kind of being healthy while doing it. You know what I mean? Not
No,
like,
absolutely, man. I've been there, and I
yeah.
always find it to be when they're in a different stage of their life where they're not a kid and bodybuilding isn't like their end all be all. It's always not only a much better experience for both of us on both ends, but also they have a lot of life perspective. They have a lot of experience on different aspects, having pushed themselves in business or with their family, or they have their priorities in check. And so bodybuilding is an additive juncture to them. So it's something that adds to their life. It doesn't take away. And they also have like this different mindset in terms of going into the diet, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, and that's why I enjoy working with them. But Thursday, 4 weeks out from Masters Nationals. So
Good to hear.
yeah. So I'll be leaner and harder. That was my goal. I want to be dug out skinless. So I was like,
Now,
it's
are we
always
going
like,
with the shoes? Did you check the shoe requirement that
so
we spoke about last
I'm
week?
gonna wait on. I'm gonna keep posing without it because
Okay.
Jason didn't like it. He's like, he goes, I don't think it's good enough to say, oh. He goes, I just don't know. So I'm just gonna work on seeing if I can keep getting steadier with my posing without it.
All right. No, I thought it looked good. I don't think the shoe is a necessity. However, how you pose and your positioning. Now, obviously, the audience doesn't know what we're speaking about, but
Yeah.
Jeff had sent me some comparison pictures in terms of progress photos and utilizing different posing styles as well as utilizing a shoe within it. And just how you were positioning yourself, how you were essentially, we have to think about it. It's from the ground up. It's from the floor. You pose from your feet all the way up until all your extremities essentially, and you were just posed more powerfully, and it displayed your physique better with the shoes on. However, if you just take those off, do the same posing, it's going to have very similar, if not the same effect.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna just work at it, and at least I've got, I can run it at the last minute and ask. That's the worst case scenario. But otherwise, dude, how's your last week been?
Man, I gotta say, it's been a phenomenal week on my end, my man. Yesterday, speaking about diet, so you're 4 weeks out from your diet. I'm 1 week out from ending my diet, but yesterday just started week 6 of this mini cut phase, which will be my final week. And although it isn't over, the last 5 weeks of the 6 week mini cut couldn't have it went any better, to be honest with you. Each week I've been spot on in terms of my weekly body weight rate of loss target I've been aiming for, which was, I covered this when I first got into the mini cut. So if anyone goes back 4 or 5 weeks, they'll be able to get a recap of that. But just to recap it a little bit more, I was essentially shooting for a 0.75 to 1% per week rate of loss. So when this phase is all said and done, I should have lost at least 5% of my body weight or just a touch over that. And that's exactly what my target has been since day one of this phase. And the reason that I aimed for 5% or more of body weight loss is that's the percentage of weight loss that we see in the literature and that's been found to improve health markers such as your blood glucose levels, your HbA1c, your blood pressure, and other biomarkers. And seeing as like we had covered this and you and I discussed this, that my blood glucose and especially my blood pressure were starting to elevate at the end of that building phase. And this was one of, besides the fact that I had no appetite, that was one of the largest reasons, or, one of the things that pushed me into going into this mini cut. So I definitely want to, I wanted to improve upon those before ending this mini cut phase. And I've done that. And this rate of loss is a little bit lower, or I guess I could say like more conservative than what I've done in past mini cuts where I've aimed for a greater rate of loss. Like generally I'm going 1 to 1.5% rate of loss per week, but I found a lot of benefits actually. And it's cool because as we get older, as we do this more often, we do this over a continued period of time, we learn new things. And so for me, I always liked mini cuts being a little bit, I would do 4 weeks and it'd be like a 1.5% rate of loss. However, I slowed it down, did a 6 week mini cut at 0.75 to 1%. And what I found is that it really helped to benefit my training performance. So I've been able to continue progressing my training, especially during the earlier weeks. Like I was seeing, week to week progressions. And then even within the last couple of weeks where I've been the leanest I've been and the most depleted, I've still, been able to maintain my loads, across exercise as well as my reps across all top sets. And so I think that this is, this more conservative rate of loss has allowed me to be able to not only diet on higher calories. So that's one reason as to why I've been able to maintain better performance than I have in previous mini cuts. But I'm also, within that nutritional aspect, I'm able to go into the gym after a high carb meal to ensure I'm well fueled. But then at the same time, because I did have, I've made some updating posts and I've said how this has been a really good experience. And I had some questions from the audience and also from followers of mine, like what was a big difference? And I also think that a big reason as to why, like I even had audience members that I had said that I wanted to do this, like I don't care about the hunger and things of that sort. And I think this also has to do, like I'm hungry, I'll be honest with you, just like
Mhm.
you are. You know what I mean? Like these are natural biological responses to an energy deficit. However, I don't really speak about that stuff or really even focus on it because I'm an experienced dieter who has done dozens of contest preps, dozens of photo shoot preps. So I'm used to what it feels like when I'm lean, and I embrace the stuff that comes along with it. And I also don't allow the fact that I'm in an energy deficit to like psych me out mentally, both in terms of like my nutrition, adjustments, or like, if I'm having a really, small or low calorie meal, like I don't let that bother me, nor do I let it make me feel like I should be seeing drops in my performance. And I truly believe like the concept, like we get better at all things over time if we are really consistent as well as we are diligent in our approach to them and really learning from the experiences of our past. And so to me, dieting is a skill that we get better at over time. And I'm sure you can attest to the fact that every time we push ourselves, to get lean, whether it be for a prep or for a photo shoot or for a mini cut, it's not, I don't want to say that it feels easier because it doesn't. But what I could say is a better way to put it would be it's more manageable and bearable. Which is something I think that many inexperienced dieters or those who haven't been successful in previous fat loss phases don't understand. And many, enter, a fat loss phase, an energy deficit, or whatever it may be, and they have like this dreaded feeling of the diet, and that actually causes them to compound a lot of the effects of dieting and of calorie restriction in and of itself because their mindset isn't in the right place. And so I really think that we have to. I always say this, but we have to realize that our psychology and our physiology are so closely tied that if you go into any venture, whether it be a fat loss phase, a mini cut, a business, venture, a even something, that's completely outside of like physical, which would be like a relationship with like this damaged mindset where everything's, doom and gloom, like you're going to experience that. You put that out in the universe and you're going to get
Mhm.
that right back. So we really have to think about that whenever we're trying to better ourselves, because none of us have to diet. And I always remind my clients about this, like I'm here for you. Like we all go through tough times, whether it's high stress or it's hunger or things of that sort, but none of you guys have to do this. I don't have to do this. And so I embrace every single day and the challenges that come along with it as an opportunity to become a better version of myself, to push myself, to see my limits, and to really be able to take those experiences that I put myself through in the gym, I've learned in the gym, as well as, within the constraints of dieting. And then I apply that to business. I apply that to my relationships. I apply that to my pursuit of being a better man. And so, if you guys can really think about the fact that fitness and the improvements that you make within fitness can be a metaphor for all aspects of life. You could really push yourself to get better in the gym, but then get better outside the gym. And that's just something, I think is really important to point out to individuals, because a lot of times they think like they almost have to do this. Oh, I have to diet, or I have to, decrease these calories, or I have to do this, or I have to. None of you guys have to do anything, honestly. You want to do this. You're choosing to do this. So just that's a little reminder for everyone out there that is, in this summer period of their life, they're dieting. Maybe you're dreading it. You'll probably see better fruits of your labor, both in terms of the physical results that you get, as well as the mental I guess, betterment that you see from the process, your enjoyment of the process, if you go in with a better and more positive mindset. But besides that, I do want to do something that we never do, and that's to take a minute before we start this week's episode. I want to read some feedback I received from a listener of the show yesterday regarding last week's episode. And he said that, I listened to your podcast with Jeff on the impact of sleep on appetite, satiety, decision making, fat loss, body composition, etc. I am very familiar with the impact of sleep and our ability to achieve body composition results, but how you outlined it with evidence-based studies and connected it in terms of what's in it for a coach and client is the best way I've ever heard it explained in one podcast, and a short podcast to boot. I also pass it along to my entire team and business partner, and he thanked us for that. And so, I just want to give a shout out to Grant for that piece of feedback, as one of the main reasons that we do this show is to have a positive impact on our clients, our listeners, our friends, and also to contribute to the ripple effect of coaching and educating. So it always means a lot when our audience, shares a show. They give us feedback, they provide us with questions, or even just maybe some advice as to how to do things better, but also some positive reinforcement for what we've laid out within the podcast. So I just wanted to read that out. We never do that. We get reviews all the time. We're 5-star rated on these podcast platforms, so anyone out there, take a minute, rate us 5 stars, preferably. But it's just something that I wanted to acknowledge.
No, you fucking rate us 5 stars. You just don't, not preferably. You don't say not preferably, Brandon. You tell me to do it.
Jeff will pressure you.
I will pressure you. Yes, I will. Anyway, yeah, man, dude, I like it when they always kind of like, I don't get too many messages, but I think it's probably because you're used to being on social media way more than me. So I'll go. And I think that's the difference of just where it is. And that's because I do brick and mortar daily. So, it's hard for me to just be in social media land 24/7. But the interactions I hear from my clients and stuff, they really like how you take everything and simplify it down. And then the questions I ask kind of either elaborate, stretch, or expand. So it seems like we got a good flow. So you guys keep rating us really well. Keep sharing us, keep showing us love. But we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about optimizing your sleep routine, Delta 8. Nutrition, lifestyle, supplement interventions for getting the perfect night of sleep. The first topic we want to get in, we got this kind of broken down into multiple parts, so that way it kind of will make sense. How improving your sleep can improve body composition outcomes. I know that personally, like right now in prep, everyone who's listening will gas, okay? But I am in my bed by 5:30 Central Time, and I'm dozing off about 6:30, 7, and I'm up around 3:30. But it's, even though I'm in bed for 9 hours, that sleep's not good at this point in prep, but I know I'm resting my body. And that's a big thing because I can tell when I get that whoosh effect sometimes when it happens. So let's get into that. How can sleep improve body composition outcomes for us, B?
All right. So in last week's episode of the show, we covered all the ways in which insufficient sleep and sleep loss can impact our body composition, including how sleep loss impacts hunger hormones, our appetite and satiety levels, our food cravings, our food choice, as well as how poor sleep can result in increased calorie intake, more lean body mass loss, and less fat mass loss during a diet, how it can decrease our metabolic rate and our total daily energy expenditure, and how it can actually increase body fat gain, especially when it comes to visceral fat accumulation. So if you're currently listening to this episode and you have yet to listen to episode 62 of the podcast, pause this one, please, and definitely go back to that episode, as the previous episode 62, pretty much lays down the foundation for what we're going to talk about today. And so seeing as sleep loss has so many effects on hindering our body composition outcomes, I really think that it's important to open up this podcast by giving you guys some incentive and essentially explaining and looking at how improving our sleep can positively impact our body composition, because we covered all the negative last week to educate you guys. However, I also want to, for every gimme, there's a gotcha. So if sleep loss causes these effects, we also want to go over what improving your sleep, which we're going to go through in detail today on how to do that, how improving your sleep can actually improve your body composition outcome. So in a 2020 randomized control trial, researchers wanted to look at how improving sleep would impact people's response to the same training program as those who did the exact same training program, but who did not focus on improving their sleep. So to test this out, they put healthy men on a 10-week resistance training program. And then what they did was they randomized them into 2 groups. And in one group, they gave them a sleep education program to improve their sleep throughout the course of the study, whereas the other group received no advice or counseling on their sleep. And so the sleep education group received like this really long list of sleep tips, including keep it dark, quiet, and cool in the room you sleep. Two, go to bed and get up at the same time during the whole week, including your weekends. Go to sleep so that you get 8 full hours of sleep. 2 hours before bed, do not expose yourself to light. So essentially, they told them to turn down their lights, put away your computer, your iPads, and your mobile phones, or use blue filter or blue light filter and the lowest possible light setting. No exercise, no food, coffee, or black tea or energy drinks, and do calm and positive activities, and do not bring up relational conflicts before bed. They also told them to, when you get up in the morning, expose yourself to as much light as possible right away. Last cup of coffee for the day, at least 6 hours before bedtime. And the last few were try to get as much sleep as you can. And you do not need an alarm clock to wake up. And do not use electronic devices that emit light in bed. And then the last one was learn a relaxation technique and use it to fall asleep at night, or utilize it if you wake up during the night. So the sleep group was regularly reminded about all these suggestions throughout the study, while the control group was blinded to these suggestions. So they pretty much were given no advice. It was just, keep doing your thing. And so at the end of the 10-week training program, they found that although both groups increased their lean body mass due to the training intervention that they had, the sleep intervention group had a larger increase in lean body mass and lost significantly more fat mass than the group not receiving the sleep education. So those who improved their sleep throughout the course of the study finished that study with significantly larger reduction in their body fat percentage. Now, we also see in sleep extension trials that improving and extending our sleep can result in lower appetite, lower cravings for sweet and salty foods, and lower calorie intake. And in a recent 2022 randomized control trial from the University of Chicago, researchers looked at the effect of sleep extension on objectively assessed energy intake among adults in real life settings, meaning they looked and measured exactly how much people were eating in response to getting better sleep. And they found that just by increasing an individual's nightly sleep duration by a little over an hour a night, it led to a significant reduction in calorie intake and led to weight loss as compared to the control group, who maintained their normal duration of sleep. And this is something we see in many areas of the literature as well. So a 2022 analysis of 3 studies looking at dieting studies found that better sleep quality was associated with greater fat mass loss during a diet when the dieters increased their baseline sleep duration by just 1 hour. So this is like low-hanging fruit, just 1 hour sleep more, and you're seeing better body composition outcomes in terms of lean body mass preservation, in terms of fat mass loss. And so what we see is that improving sleep habits can influence the success of our physique improvement pursuits, both in our ability to build muscle and to drop body fat.
So we have this kind of broken up into 6 main factors that impact our ability to get to sleep and stay asleep. So I'm going to go over them and then we're going to break this down. How does that sound? 1, light exposure. 2, nutrition. 3, temperature. 4, alcohol. 5, caffeine. 6, exercise. That being said, the first one be light exposure. I know for me, I sleep with a dye mask.
Because, no, and I've done the same thing. I have blackout curtains and everything.
Yep, blackout curtains, eye mask. And I wish I had known this when I was bouncing and doing multiple jobs and all the crazy hours in my 20s, even with work in the Homeland Security. I probably would have enjoyed my life a lot more because, trying to go to bed at 6 p.m. when I didn't even think about that shit sucks. So how does light exposure affect our sleep?
Absolutely. So maybe right before I cover light exposure, maybe I should indicate why these factors influence our sleep quality or sleep quantity, because there are several factors, as you just covered, Jeff, that influence when we are awake and when we are able to sleep. And first, what we have is called zeitgebers, which are time givers. And the main zeitgeber, as we're about to cover, is light, which influences our internal body clock and circadian rhythm the most. Then when we look at the other main zeitgebers or time givers, essentially, we have our eating schedule and meal timing, as well as our activity levels and time of training. So in addition to these zeitgebers, we also have other factors that influence our ability to get to sleep and get quality sleep, which we're also going to cover. These aren't technically zeitgebers. However, they are factors that influence our sleep quality and our sleep quantity. So those are going to be temperature, caffeine, and alcohol. And there's also many other factors that impair our sleep and impact our ability to get high quality sleep. We're not going to cover these, but just for you guys out there in the audience, I think we should just, acknowledge them. And that's including things like not prioritizing sleep into your routine, stress and anxiety, social demands. So that could be going out with friends at night, or engaging in like social connections and things of that sort. Social media is a huge one. Work commitments, like your work schedule, your daily commute, your business travel, which can result in jet lag, your lifestyle choices and drug use. So we're not going to cover those, but I just want you guys to keep those in mind. Like these are factors that you need to account for, and you need to be able to modulate and monitor in order to optimize your sleep routine. So when we look at light exposure, light, as I mentioned before, is the main zeitgeber, which influences our suprachiasmatic nucleus the most, or our internal body clock, essentially. And so seeing light early in the day is the most powerful stimulus for wakefulness during the day and helps with our abilities to get to sleep and stay asleep later that night. So we want to get light exposure early in the day to essentially set up our circadian rhythm and our sleep and wake cycles. And so light exposure early in the day also helps to lower melatonin production during the morning. So the timing of our light exposure is really important for setting up our body clock for the day, as we want to view light in the day to set us up to be alert and energetic, but we also want to limit light later in the evening to be able to wind down and relax. So we actually want these opposing things. So at night, what we want to do is we want to avoid artificial light, such as blue light that comes from our phone screens, computers, and things like that before bed, because that's going to suppress melatonin production and will interrupt our ability to initiate sleep. And this is because
Mhm.
blue light signals daytime to our brain and stops the production of melatonin, which is needed to get us to fall asleep and then also to stay asleep. So this is why you should be looking to minimize your exposure to blue light in the hours before bed and use strategies like dimming the lights in your house, putting your phone or your Apple devices on night mode, turning the brightness down on your TV, and using candles so that your body is able to get into a relaxed state, into that parasympathetic rest and digest state where it's ready for bed. So essentially, when we look at light, we want light exposure early in the day, and then we
Mhm.
want to essentially taper off our light exposure as we tend to wind down or we're trying to get to bed. So think about it: biological morning, biological night. Light in the morning, light during the day, and then at night when it's dark, just keep it dark. It's super simple, but a lot of people don't realize that we have such impairments to sleep quality because we're in an artificial environment. We have overhead lighting at all times. People are
Mhm.
going food shopping. Sometimes I talk to some of my clients and I'm like, they're talking to me about how they had a really rough night of sleep the night before. And I'm like, oh, well, what did you do? And they were like, well, I ran out to Walmart at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Like that is the most artificial light you're going to get anywhere. That overhead,
Yeah.
blue light, like that's like being in a hospital building. And so that's another thing. I had a client recently had surgery, and she was providing me feedback that she had horrendous sleep. And it's not only the fact she actually had her own room, but it's people are coming in and out, but it's also that light that's in those hospital rooms. And so all in all, guys, early exposure to light in the day, and then taper that light down during the evening, and you'll be able to get much better sleep.
Can I say something? I actually wrote about that in
Absolutely.
my book about how I think my hours always so about after about 6 o'clock they would stop disturbing me until about 3 a.m. They're just so I would be curious your clients notice something similar around after dinner. They'd
Interesting.
kind of leave you alone and then they'd start checking on you around 3 or 4. But I think that's kind of why I got thrown in that weird sleep pattern. But you're right, you just sleep awful. It's too noisy. There's things beep, boop, bump, people scream, fall, people talk. It's just you're not resting in a hospital. I think that's why they got really smart about after surgeries trying to get you home and out as quick as possible. To some degree, people think it's all the insurance. I'm like, I don't know, man. Because going through it with Keegan's thing, like when he broke his leg during COVID, they wanted to keep him there, and then there was going to be 4 days to operate. When I knew they were just going to splint him and hold him like that. And I told the doctor, and the doctor argued with me. I said, "Can I just say something before you get into this?" And he goes, "What's that, my friend?" And I said, "Well, I was a kid and I know what it's like to be in these 4 gray walls for days and days on end, just waiting." And I go, "At least at home, he's got his bed,
He's got
he's got his
comfort.
TV, he's got his dog, he's got things like that." And it was a med student at Vanderbilt. And he came as we were leaving and thanked me. He's like, "Thank you for giving me that perspective because I would never have thought about that." And he goes, and I was like, "Yeah, no, it's cool. I get it." So that's really cool that you said that, man. I think that's neat when people notice things like that. Let's get into nutrition. How does this affect your sleep? Like, I think we all kind of now starting to see now it's not good to eat a heavy meal before bed. That's a big one. So let's get into
Man, we're gonna
this.
we're gonna go into it, man.
All
So
right, all right.
when we look at nutrition and sleep, there's a bidirectional relationship between sleep and nutrition, meaning they both impact one another. So poor sleep can impact our nutrition habits, as we covered in last week's podcast, but poor nutrition can also negatively impact our sleep quality and our sleep quantity. And this is where the concept of chrononutrition comes into the equation.
Mhm.
So for anyone interested in taking a deep dive into the topic of chrononutrition, we covered it in detail with Danny Lennon on,
Yeah,
I
that
believe
was
it
a
was
great
episode
episode.
38 of the podcast. So guys, go
Yeah.
back episode 38. It's within those late 30s. I know that for a fact. But essentially, I'll give a recap of it. And so chrononutrition describes the relationship between our body's biological and circadian rhythms with our nutrition. So the field of chrononutrition is basically looking at how the timing of our nutrition relates to and impacts our circadian biology and our circadian health. And although chrononutrition is mostly focused on when we eat, it also looks at how what we eat influences our body's internal clock. So the goal when trying to improve our sleep is to manipulate our lifestyle and eating schedules to improve both our bodies and our health. And so this is where
Mm.
if we use the info that we have about circadian rhythms to influence our eating habits, we can yield better outcomes both in terms of our sleep quality and quantity, as well as with our metabolic health. So when we look at the main principles of chrononutrition, they center around the timing and the distribution of our food across the day. So what their principles essentially show is that you want to bias more of your calorie intake early in the day, as that's when you're more insulin sensitive first and foremost, and also when your digestive system is better able to handle and assimilate larger meals and amounts of nutrients. And so research suggests that we should wait at least a half hour after our normal wake time before we eat a meal. And then from there, we want to maintain a consistent eating pattern on a daily basis where meals are spaced out a few hours apart. You also want to have your last meal at least 2 hours or more before your bedtime. And this is because about 2 hours prior to our usual sleep time, so say that you usually go to bed at 10 o'clock, we're talking about 8 p.m. at this point. 2 hours before our usual sleep time is when the pineal gland in the brain starts to release melatonin. So ingesting a meal within 2 hours of bed can divert our energy towards digestion and impair our ability to get sleep and also to stay asleep. And so aim to eat your last meal of the evening 2 or more hours before going to lay down for sleep. And this will give your body some time to digest the nutrients you're taking in so that your ability to get to sleep isn't hindered by you eating right before bed and going to sleep on a full stomach. You should also avoid saving the majority of your calories for the end of the day. Um, to essentially like partition your last meal of the day right before bed. And this is something I encounter with so many individuals where like they're saving calories, you know what I mean? They're bunching up all towards the end of the day, but they have shit sleep quality. Usually they have insulin sensitivity issues. And
Mm.
so this will not only impair your ability to get to sleep, but also from a chrononutrition perspective, we're less responsive to large meals late at night as compared to consuming those exact same meals, meaning the exact same calories, exact same macronutrients early in the day, especially from an insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake perspective. So the last thing that you want to do in terms of timing is avoid eating in the biological night, meaning if you're someone that's getting up in the middle of the night to get snacks and stuff, like we really have to address your energy distribution throughout the course of the day. Now, when it comes to exactly what we should eat before bed, there is no research study that's going to directly tell us exactly what the perfect final meal of the day is to maximize sleep. However, we do have enough research on how individual nutrients impact sleep to piece together a sensible approach to our final meal of the evening. And I'll tell you personally, I've looked into this research heavily, especially a few years ago. What I did was I looked onto the research on each macronutrient's effect on sleep when I myself was dealing with insomnia due to traveling across the country on a frequent basis. And so essentially what I was encountering or what I was suffering from was jet lag. So
Mm.
I've spent the last few years applying these nutritional principles to myself and to my clients, and I found them to be quite effective. So the first component of your meal of your final meal of the day should be protein, as protein not only helps from a body composition perspective, but it is very effective at regulating blood glucose, which is important for maintaining stable blood sugar levels. And this can be beneficial for sleep, as when our blood sugar levels drop low in the middle of the night, our body will release both adrenaline and then also cortisol to release energy and bring our blood sugar back up, which will impair sleep, which is also often why people will wake up like with this adrenaline dump in the middle of the night. And protein is also very satiating, which can help with hunger management, so you're less likely to wake up as a result of hunger. Another aspect of protein that many overlook and that's beneficial directly to sleep is that it contains tryptophan. And data shows that high protein diets lead to higher concentrations of tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin production and can lead downstream to melatonin production, which can positively impact both our sleep and improve sleep onset. Another component of the final meal of the day that can improve sleep is having carbs in that final meal. So, consuming a carbohydrate containing meal within a few hours of sleep has been shown to improve sleep latency, meaning it reduces the amount of time it takes to get to sleep, but can also improve sleep quality by improving our REM sleep. And a 2016 review on the effects of different diets on sleep quality found 3 studies where consuming a higher carbohydrate diet positively influenced sleep architecture, particularly our REM and our slow wave sleep, as compared to the consumption of a low carb diet, which actually appeared to reduce our REM sleep. And carb consumption has also been shown to increase plasma levels or plasma tryptophan concentrations as insulin, which is released when we eat carbohydrates, influences the transport of tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier. So after a carb-rich meal, we're able to get this effect. And this increase in tryptophan availability increases the synthesis or our availability essentially for the synthesis of serotonin and ultimately melatonin, which is why we want to combine both protein and carbs in that final meal of the day. So we get the tryptophan from the protein, and we also are able to shuttle it with the carbohydrates. But another thing that I've just found, personally in practice with clients that have high stress and high cortisol levels is we can help mitigate this issue with carbohydrates. So carbs cause the release of insulin, which is counter-regulatory to cortisol. So it can help lower cortisol production. And this can help improve sleep latency in those who have issues falling asleep due to being sympathetically dominant, or those that are essentially in the state of high stress and high cortisol. The next component of the final meal should be that it contains fiber. And in order to improve sleep quality, we want to ensure our diet has adequate fiber, as fiber helps to increase the satiety we get from meals and can also have a positive impact on sleep by improving specifically slow wave sleep. Research has also found that low fiber and high saturated fat and sugar intake is associated with lighter, less restorative sleep with more arousals, meaning more wake ups throughout the night. And so what we want is higher fiber intake, lower saturated fat intake, and lower sugar, especially within that final meal, because we also have research that compares a high saturated fat meal to a low saturated fat meal and found that the lower saturated fat meal led to a quicker onset of sleep. And so when it comes to nutrition for sleep, you want to make sure that your last meal of the day contains high protein, moderate carb, and contains fiber. And that really, when it comes down to it, that would be like the best combination for improved sleep quality, especially within that last meal of the day. But we also want to make sure that we're not having these very high fat and high calorie meals, because remember, digestion is a process that takes energy. It also increases core body temperature, which is the next thing we're going to go into is temperature. And within that, that will impair sleep quality.
All right, let's get into temperature. Are we talking about like cooling your house down? Are you talking house hacks like that temperature, like to get the core temperature down? You're talking that kind of temperature, right?
We're initially talking core temperature, but that is one of these strategies, would be cooling your house. So temperature plays a role in our sleep, as in order to get to sleep and stay asleep, we need our core body temperature to drop about 1 degree Celsius or 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And most research shows that between around 65 to 67 degrees is the best temperature to set your room at to be able to go to sleep, as we want to sleep in a cooling environment. And this is why, if you ever notice, like, have you ever been able to fall asleep on a hot summer night where your AC is blown out? Absolutely not. You're sweating, you're uncomfortable, you have the hot sweats, like whatever it may be. And so
Mhm.
within that, it's always easier to fall asleep in a cold room than it is in a hot one. And cooling core body temperature is especially helpful for, this is for all people, because this is just a biological response, but especially what I found it really helpful for is those clients that I have that are in perimenopause, due to the impact that hot flashes have on their sleep. Because anyone that's worked with perimenopausal clients will tell you that that is one of the most deleterious effects or negative effects of this transition into menopause, is that they're dealing with hot flashes. They feel extremely uncomfortable. Their core body temperature is increasing during the middle of the night, and they have impaired sleep quality. So now they're having all these downstream effects because of the lack of sleep that they're getting. And so it makes the entire situation worse. So this is where, like, I've suggested cooling pads to clients. I've had them do different ways to be able to cool their body temperature. And two of the ways that we're able to drop our core body temperature that is most research supported is to take a hot shower before bed. As although this may sound counterintuitive, and often when I speak to clients about this, they're like, "You want me to get hot to get cold?" And that's exactly what I tell them. Like, you get hot to get cold, essentially. And it actually decreases our core body temperature. Another way to do this, which a lot of people would find funny, and I always get this interaction with clients when I tell them this, is when we warm our extremities, like our hands or our feet, it actually cools our core body temperature. So actually wearing socks in bed has been shown to benefit sleep due to that effect. And so the relationship between temperature and sleep is also why you don't want to eat a huge meal before bed, as the digestive system will increase your body temperature to digest food. And we also have a higher thermic effect of feeding from larger calorie dense meals. But also another thing that increases core body temperature is alcohol consumption, because of the upregulation in metabolism or thermic effect that we get from ingesting alcohol, because the body's trying to process this toxin essentially. And so the next thing we're going to go into is alcohol.
Why is okay? So alcohol. So I guess you're gonna say that drinking a glass of wine before bed every night is probably not a good thing. like a lot of people want to say.
You know what's ironic about this is that,
Mhm.
I always have found this to be a great irony because a lot of people associate alcohol and sleep, and they look at alcohol as a way to relieve stress and get sleep. But in reality, if we actually look at, like, guys, I'm not telling you, like, I'm not demonizing alcohol out here. What I'm telling you is that if we look mechanistically, we look both in terms of mechanistic studies, how alcohol metabolism works, as well as what we see in the actual literature on individuals ingesting alcohol before bed, is alcohol may, to some people, like, psychologically, it might feel like a stress relief, but it's actually a stressor on our system, and it's a sedative. But we have to realize we have to differentiate between sedation and sleep, because being sedated isn't the same as getting high quality sleep. So when we actually look at the research on alcohol, it's been shown to block REM sleep, which is our dream sleep and is crucial for the production of anabolic hormones like testosterone. It fragments our sleep and it inhibits restorative sleep, so we don't get as much refreshing sleep, which is a lot of times why you'll notice that your sleep will be broken up, especially if you, like, track your sleep like through an Aura, or if you track it through like one of these tracking apps. You'll see that there was a lot more nighttime wake ups, even if you don't remember it, even if you were knocked out because you were drunk as a skunk. You're going to be getting up throughout the middle of the night. And it also, another huge effect of alcohol is it inhibits antidiuretic hormones. So it has this pro-diuretic effect, which will cause you to have to pee more during the night, which will interrupt sleep. And we all know this. Like, anyone that's drank alcohol, like during the afternoon or the evening, has noticed that they've had to go to the bathroom more often. The same thing happens at night. And then the last effect, as I mentioned previously with temperature, is it increases core body temperature. So it's going to make your sleep worse. So there's
Mhm.
all these downstream cascades. It's not that you guys can never have alcohol. It's just you have to be extremely aware of the effects of these type of things. And if you are going to have alcohol, separate it at least a few hours before bed.
I'll be honest with you, I've never, ever, 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 ever had a good night's sleep on alcohol whatsoever. And I try to tell people that. I'm like, I get it because some people need in quotes to help them unwind. But I'm like, ultimately, all it's doing is spiking your blood glucose. It's dehydrating you, which is then spiking. I mean, there's just not a lot of really good to it. And I always tell everybody eventually that will catch up with you with visceral fat gain and other things like that you will be pissed off, men and women both. So I always tell everybody the study saying that the red wine preventing heart disease was just a
That's been
cop
recently
out.
disproven.
Yeah,
There
exactly. And
used to be a J curve
so you
to
want to know
the
something interesting?
efficacy of that.
You want to know something interesting? Hommel, who wrote the book about copper that I was a big fan of, he actually said in that study that the reason that if it did anything for heart disease is because they used French wine in the studies, and French wine has
It's
been,
called the French paradox.
yeah, it's with the copper infused in the soil. Where over here in the U.S. they don't have that in the wine. So he thought that that was an interesting thing to
And
point
we
out.
also have to look at the healthy user effect, or it's
Sure.
bias in terms of what is the rest of their lifestyle looking like. If we look at, like, the certain tribes, they have certain habits that wouldn't really be even like blue zones. They don't have every single thing isn't in line. Like, some of them drink alcohol, they smoke cigarettes or smoke tobacco. However, every other aspect of their life is dialed in. They have great connection, relationships with their community. They have religious practices. They get sunlight exposure. They do a lot of movement. They walk places. They have a whole food predominant diet. They are so different than the standard American, the way that the average American is living within the standard American diet and the standard American lifestyle. So I think really when we take, like, epidemiological data from another country that isn't our
Mhm.
own, and we try to apply it and try to get the benefits, it's always like we're always looking for the negatives from, like, an outside space, but then also we're looking for positive. Like, if they confirm our biases, like if you're someone that really likes alcohol, you're trying to pull from every part of the literature you can. Or if you're someone, you have a certain diet style, you love, specific diet A, you love paleo, so you're going to be going to, like, the ancestral ruins and stuff. And, like, this is a big issue within nutrition, especially within fitness in general, I guess, is nutritional tribalism. Like, we want to belong to a tribe, so we want to find research and information that backs and confirms our biases. And I just don't look at research like that. And that's also why I don't read books on nutrition, because they're actually more times wrong than they are right. And if you actually go to, like, a really great research site for this is called Red Pen Reviews, and they go through all the claims and the citations within different books, especially on the concept of nutrition. And it's a full the staff is essentially all PhDs or master's levels in nutrition, and they have a background in the area. And if you ever look at some of the top books, like the most popular books that you've heard of for nutrition in terms of, like, the lay public, you'll see them get ripped apart from an actual scientific credibility standpoint, because what they say, the claims they make, aren't, even though they have citations in it, when they actually go into the citations, they don't reinforce the claims that they made. So they're essentially, kind of misguiding or they're extrapolating certain information to seem like they're being scientifically accurate when in reality they're not. So it's another case with like, alcohol and it having a beneficial effect. A lot of times these claims get taken out of proportion, whereas we really have to be a little bit more objective with what the actual data, what the randomized control trials, what the meta-analysis, and what the hierarchy of evidence, especially at the top of that hierarchy, really show about these concepts.
I agree 100%. How does caffeine play into all this?
Uh,
Is there a certain amount of milligrams people want to consider not going above? Is there certain times people want to consider not doing anything like alcohol or caffeine related wise?
Yeah, so we'll talk about it just for a wide, almost like a broad perspective, because it's really hard to, you know, narrow down, don't take this amount, because there's different caffeine metabolizers, different half-lives and things of that sort. But really, like when we look at what caffeine does, it affects a molecule that increases our drive to sleep called adenosine. And adenosine builds up throughout the course of the day when we're awake, and it's responsible for sleep pressure we feel, aka the sleepiness we get towards the end of the day when we've been awake for a substantial portion of time. So if we were to never take in caffeine, we didn't take any naps throughout the day, what you would see is the levels of adenosine in our system would actually rise throughout the course of the day as we build up sleep pressure. However, caffeine is an adenosine antagonist, which binds the receptor for adenosine and essentially blocks the action of adenosine, which is why it's so effective for alertness and energy, but also why it can interrupt our sleep so much. So if you ever notice, like if you had a night of poor sleep, or you're really feeling tired, like caffeine is one of the most reliable ways to undo that or to try to mitigate those effects, and it has the same effect on sleep. And caffeine, when we actually look at it, has an average half-life of 5 to 6 hours, but it can extend it to up to 9 to 10 hours in certain individuals, which is why it's really hard to give anyone an exact, I can give you an hour per, an hour I guess suggestion, but the amount would be based on your body weight, would be based on your genes, would be based on the enzymes to break down caffeine, and then also if you're one of those quick metabolizers within 5 to 6 hours or 9 to 10 hours. And so what we want is, you want to keep that in mind in terms of like the half-life. When timing your stimulants like caffeine, as it has a long half-life. So if you take in, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you take in 300 milligrams of caffeine at 5 p.m. prior to training, but you need to be in bed by 10 p.m. to get a full night of sleep, you'll have at least 150 milligrams in your system by 10 p.m., which is basically, if we think about it, like logically, 150 milligrams is a strong cup of coffee. Generally, just a regular cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams. You have like a strong Starbucks, that's 150 milligrams potentially. And so that's basically the same thing as you taking a strong cup of coffee and then going, to lay down right away. And so even if you find that you can have caffeine late in the day, because this is something I get from certain clients, they're like, oh, I can fall asleep after having caffeine. What you don't realize is that it's still going to diminish your overall sleep quantity and sleep quality, because caffeine causes sleep fragmentation, which lowers sleep efficacy, sleep efficiency, and sleep quality when we have it in our system. So what we found is, or what we see in research, is that research has found that having a cup of coffee in the evening can reduce deep REM sleep by anywhere between 20 and 40%. And then there was actually a recent 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis on the effect of caffeine on subsequent sleep. So essentially what they found was, or what they looked at was, does consuming caffeine in the evening impact sleep later that night? And so what they found was caffeine consumption reduced total sleep time by 45 minutes and sleep efficiency by 7%, with an increase in sleep onset latency, meaning time to go to sleep, by 9 minutes, and wake after sleep onset of 12 minutes. Duration and proportion of light sleep increase with caffeine intake, and the duration and proportion of our deep sleep decrease with caffeine intake. So their recommendations and essentially what they recommended based off this meta-analysis was to in order to avoid reductions in total sleep time, coffee should be consumed no closer than 8.8 hours prior to your sleep time. So like I said, anywhere between 6 and 9 hours, we really want to avoid it. It's going to depend on you as an individual. This is something you're going to have to try out, but most of the literature leans towards that upper end of the echelon, in terms of, if you have a general cup of coffee that's 100 milligrams, they're saying don't have that within essentially 9 hours of bed. It was 8.8 hours in the study.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, how does exercise wrap this motherfucker up?
All right. So exercise can play a vital role in improving sleep quality as long as it's done away from the time in which you plan to go to sleep. So research from the National Sleep Foundation found that individuals who exercise frequently report getting higher quality sleep as compared to those who exercise less frequently. So what they see is that frequent exercisers report feeling more refreshed by their sleep, less sleepy throughout the day, and they also report falling asleep faster and staying asleep more consistently. And a 2015 meta-analysis or meta-analytic review that looked at 66 studies on the effects of physical activity and sleep found that acute exercise has beneficial effects on total sleep time, sleep onset latency, sleep efficiency, stage 1 sleep, and slow wave sleep, wake time after sleep onset, and REM sleep. And they also found that regular exercise has beneficial effects on total sleep time and sleep efficiency, sleep onset latency, and on total sleep quality. And another meta analysis of 13 studies found that exercise was associated with an increase in non rapid eye movement sleep, specifically stage 3 sleep, which is the most restorative stage. And last but not least, another meta analysis found that regular exercise has 4 consistent benefits, and that's improving sleep efficiency, improving or increasing the amount of sleep achieved throughout the night, an increase in the speed of falling asleep, and an improvement in the quality of sleep experience. So what we see essentially in the literature is on days that people exercise, they sleep far better and for a greater period of time as compared to a day where they haven't exercised or compared to those who don't exercise frequently. So just by being a regular exerciser, just by being active throughout the day, you are improving your sleep quality and improving your ability to not only get to sleep, but also stay asleep.
Hmm. I have a question. Do you prefer clients, if they can, to work out at a certain time of day? Do you think it offers benefit? Or do you go based upon what stresses them out least to get them in their schedule? Like, say, for example, if we're talking about sleep issues, would you try to get them to train at a certain time of day to correct the sleep issue if you suspect exercise is a culprit, over exercising or kind of, maybe too late, things like that? How would you work on that? Because that might be a question we might get.
Yeah, so really it's going to come down to when can that person fit it in their schedule and be most adherent to that program. And so if it's going to be an issue where they can only train after the evening, and say I had them on a 4-day routine, then 2 days per week, that's all well and good. However, then 2 days I'm going to specifically distribute that onto the weekends where they have more ease of access, they have better control over their schedule, and then I would try to get them to train especially earlier in the day. However, if I do have someone that's training late in the evening, I'm having them take non-stimulant pre-workout, or if they need something for focus, we're utilizing a mix of nootropics rather than stimulants, and I'm still having them cut off, say that their normal sleep time is 9 or 10 p.m. I'm still having them start to cut out caffeine and having a caffeine cutoff essentially by 12. And so despite the fact that they're getting exercise in the evening, it's not also being compounded by the effect of caffeine late in the evening that would really deteriorate their sleep. And so, really, when it comes down to it, it's what can that person consistently stick to? What can they adhere to? But a lot of times, I work with professionals that either work out on their work break, and that's a suggestion I make. Sometimes I have a lot of clients that work out before or, go to the gym before work. And that I've seen that myself, as well as in many clients, to actually improve their sleep quality. However, it's not a make or break thing where it's like, if we work together and we're trying to improve your sleep, you have to go to the gym in the morning. It is based on like what can you actually do, what is going to fit into your family life. But I work with a lot of people now that either run businesses or they have a family, and so actually working out prior to work is actually more convenient and easier for them to adhere to, because once they get home in the evening, they have the day-to-day responsibilities of attending to a family, a spouse, children. And so really when it comes down to it, there's a multifactorial list as to why someone would want to train earlier in the day besides sleep. But it's also beneficial to sleep because it's going to set up your circadian rhythm in terms of exercise, because it is a Zeitgeber, so it is going to signal to the body that it's early, or that it's daytime. And then also we get a response from being in a sympathetically driven state from exercising, where we're going to have the release of catecholamines like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And so if you're training right before bed, like say you were to train at 9 o'clock at night, and I used to do this because this was the only time I had in my schedule during one part of my life. You train at 9 o'clock and then you eat your last meal and then you go right to bed. You try to do that. So now we have all these compounding factors. And let's say you add caffeine to that mix. And so this is like the worst of the worst, a recipe for disaster. You have caffeine in your system a couple hours before bed. You did a heavy, high intensity workout, which we know can put you in a sympathetic state where it's hard to just down regulate and calm down, let alone try to go to sleep. And then you have this big, heavy meal. Like all those things are going to take away or hinder sleep. So that's really where we have to rework your schedule to be able to potentially mitigate some of the issues that you're dealing with.
Oh, well, I guess the better thing then. So let's talk about tips to ensure a better night's sleep. Now, I am a proponent of a sleep routine, just like you have a morning routine. I don't like my day to start on fire just as much as I don't like my day to end in fire. Is that something you recommend? And then what are some other tips you could do besides obviously, some of the stuff we've talked about already, from hot showers to the cold room to things like that?
Yeah. So in order to improve our sleep, we need to improve our routines, schedules, habits, and environment to optimize our sleep. And as someone who dealt with insomnia, like I'll tell you personally, guys, as a result of working for a national sales job, which had me traveling cross country multiple times a month, there were some weeks, back in my corporate career where I'd be on 3 different time zones all within the same week. And so I'm way too familiar with getting shitty sleep and all the negative downstream effects that sleep loss can have. And so after last week's episode, I had a lot of the listeners ask me how I knew so much about sleep. And it's because it's something that I've had to dig in so deeply. And I initially started researching to help myself and then, start helping my clients. And over the last, especially like the last 3.5 years, since I stopped traveling excessively for my career, I've taken all the research I've done, the experiments I've tried, and the trial and error that I've learned from and dialed in my sleep routine to the point where I've literally, completely shifted my previously shitty sleep habits. And as a result, I've seen so many benefits, especially from like a cognitive function and memory perspective, which is probably why they're one of the reasons why I'm able to retain information so well now. So I'm going to go over all the tips, the interventions, and the tools I've used with myself and clients, and I've found a tremendous benefit of. So the first thing is setting up yourself for success with your sleep routine starts when you wake up. So try to get up and get out of your bed after your alarm goes off the first time. Aim for getting some natural sunlight, preferably direct sunlight exposure within an hour or two of waking, as this can help you regulate your circadian rhythm, decrease the levels of melatonin in your system, and can increase alertness and wakefulness. And a great way to start your day and to anchor your wake and sleep schedule is to wake up and to get 20 to 30 minutes of sunlight exposure within a few hours of waking. During this time, it's also a great opportunity to hit some steps and kill two birds with one stone by getting outside, getting some physical activity, and getting that sunlight exposure. But if you can't do this, what I would suggest is you buy a 10,000 lux lamp, which is also like a light therapy lamp. They also, will label them as like SAD lamps or seasonal affective disorder lamps, and you can get that on Amazon and use that for 30 minutes. And so what I do is I get up a couple hours before the sun comes up. Many people in our audience knows I'm up between 3 and 4, so there is no light. And so what I do is I have two light therapy lamps. I have one in my bathroom that I get ready in, and then also one in my office. So what I do is I have it on while I'm getting ready in the morning, and then I'll have it on my desk as I work in the morning. And then once the sun comes up, then I'll go for a walk to get that natural sunlight exposure. Next, you need to create a consistent wake and sleep schedule. So our bodies and our brains operate best when we create a consistent schedule. And this not only applies to the consistency of our nutrition in terms of our meal timing and nutrient timing and to our training, but it's especially important to create and maintain a consistent schedule when it comes to our sleep and wake times. And the reason why consistency is so important when it comes to the timing aspect of our daily routine is because our bodies are governed by circadian rhythms that act as internal clocks. And those clocks operate best when we maintain a consistent schedule that's anchored by consistent sleep and wake times. So many physiological processes within the body are dictated by our circadian rhythm. So by keeping consistent sleep and wake routine, we enable our body to run these processes more efficiently. And this includes the production of hormones that influence our ability to get to sleep and stay asleep, like melatonin and cortisol, which will be more likely to be produced at the right times and in the right amounts if you maintain a consistent sleep routine. So I'll give you guys some insight how I created a consistent sleep and wake cycle or sleep wake time. And what I did was I essentially worked backwards from the morning to the night. So I want to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night. But none of us have 100% sleep efficiency, meaning if you go down to sleep and you give yourself 8 hours, you're not going to get 8 hours. So what I do is I set up my sleep routine. What I do is I always give myself 8.5 hours in bed to hit my target sleep length essentially. And I also aim to not deviate my sleep and wake times within a half hour or within an hour essentially across the week, including weekends. So what you want to do to create a consistent wake and sleep time is by taking the average time that you need to be up for work every morning, or essentially taking the time that you need to be up for work in the morning and working backwards from there based on how many hours of sleep you want to aim for, which most experts, if you like look into the sleep research, generally most people will recommend between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night, which would actually be 8 to 10 hours of actual time in bed. Because like I mentioned, we don't get full sleep efficiency. And I think it's also important to note that there's this concept called the sleepless elite, which often people will like allude to. And these are like these rare individuals who can function on only 4 hours of sleep per night. But actually, when you look in the research on this topic, it's found that only 5% of the population has the gene that's needed to perform on 4 to 6 hours of sleep. So that's most likely not you guys. So aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Also, when creating a consistent sleep schedule, you want to aim to keep consistent sleep and wake times and a consistent amount of sleep throughout the week, to avoid suffering from what's called social jet lag, which is essentially when changes in our sleep and wake schedule cause circadian phase shifts that cause similar effects to jet lag from travel. So if you usually go to bed, say from Monday to Thursday, like during the work week, you go to bed at 10 p.m. But on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you go to bed at 1 a.m. That's essentially like taking your cross country flight from New York to LA and shifting time zones every single weekend, which a lot of people don't think of it like that. But that's essentially what you're doing. You're exposing yourself to jet lag. And so research has also shown that when you have consistent or inconsistent sleep times, it will diminish sleep quality even if the quantity is kept the same. So you guys can get the same 8 hours, but if you're always, 8 hours across the week, every single day, but if you're constantly shifting times, you're not getting as good of sleep quality despite spending the same amount of time in bed. Now, we also want to look at activity and we want to be active throughout the course of the day so that we're expending energy and we're able to build up sleep pressure. And this is because as we expend energy, especially through activity, physical activity, through training, things of that sort, we utilize ATP because that's our energy currency. And that actually builds up adenosine. And adenosine is that sleep pressure gauge, essentially, that causes the drive to sleep later in the day. Another thing we want to do is create a caffeine cutoff time. And caffeine consumption should be done mostly early in the day. So I would suggest not consuming a large dose of caffeine within 6 to 9 hours of your bedtime. So, for example, I generally will be in bed by 8 p.m. or earlier for myself personally. And so I never consume caffeine past noon. Another thing we want to do is avoid napping late in the day because you want to avoid napping during the day if you notice that you have issues falling asleep at night.
Mhm.
And if you do decide to take a nap or you feel you need one to like be able to kind of like recharge yourself, what you want to do is make sure that it's no later than the mid afternoon. So that would be like an example that would be like a 20-minute nap around 1 p.m. Now, when it comes to the pre-sleep wind down routine tips, you want to consume your last meal at least 2 or more hours before bed. You want to put on a pair of blue blockers and start turning down artificial lights at least 2 hours before your desired bedtime, because what we want to do is we want to limit artificial light at night because electronic devices emit blue light, which signals to your body that it's still daytime. And using blue light filtering apps on your iPhone like Night Shift or F.Lux on your laptop can help limit blue light exposure, which will allow your body to recognize that it's nighttime and to start producing melatonin as a result. And I also, like personally, I utilize blue blocking glasses at least 2 hours before the time that I aim to go to bed. And so as the
Yeah.
sun goes down, you want to limit the artificial light exposure and or use blue light blocking glasses while looking at any screens like your phone or your computer or also while watching TV. Another thing you want to do is taper your fluid intake. So what I like to have clients do is I always say first thing, hydrate before you caffeinate. Because the first thing most people do is they pop a fat burner or they pop a coffee or something, not something that's hydrating you. So start the day by front loading your fluid intake and getting your hydration in earlier in the day. And then taper your fluid intake towards the evening so that you're not constantly having to wake up throughout the night to pee. Because this is a big nocturia, which is like nighttime urination, is something that a lot of people deal with. And they complain that it's impacting their sleep quality, but a lot of times they're causing it themselves due to their fluid intake habits. They're drinking a ton before bed or with their final meal. So I generally would recommend do not drink any fluids beyond your final meal of the day, which should be 2 or 3 hours before bed. Another thing is you
Yeah.
should
Move
aim
the
to
sips.
exactly. So you should aim to de-stress and decompress. So start aiming to wind down mentally and physically at least an hour before your desired bedtime. You want to avoid activities that stimulate you, including checking social media, watching the news or media outlets, responding to emails or work-related items. And instead do something relaxing that doesn't overstimulate you, such as taking a bath, journaling, or reading a book. And if you notice that sleep is hard to come by due to like racing thoughts, this is something I get a lot from clients. Due to stress or anxiety, try stress relieving strategies like journaling, or I like having clients do what's called a brain dump before bed. So like channel everything out, get all your emotions out on paper, be able to really objectively look at it, try to work through it and get it all out of your system before you go to lay down. So it's just not swirling around in your head. But another thing is if you see that this is an issue that's becoming chronic, you're always having issues getting to sleep because you have stress, because you have anxiety, because you have ruminating thoughts, and starting to really impact your mental health, not only from the fact that you're getting impaired sleep quality, which will have downstream cascades on your mental health, but also if it's something that you're noticing becoming an issue, like you're becoming overly fixated on certain issues issues within your life, don't hesitate to talk to someone, preferably a mental health professional who can help you work through your issues and manage your stressors. Another big thing is taking a hot shower before bed, because a hot shower before bed can help with temperature regulation, as it helps to cool your core body temperature, which helps with getting to sleep. And then also at the same time, just like we want to cool our body temperature, we also want to avoid things that increase body temperature, such as intense exercise, caffeine use or stimulant use, large meals, and alcohol within the hours leading to bed. And lastly, you want to optimize your sleep environment and bedroom to maximize both sleep quality and sleep quantity. And to do this, I'd suggest creating a sleep cave that's cool, dark, and quiet. So you should set up your bedroom in a manner where it's cool, dark, quiet, because that's what's going to help to optimize sleep quality. And make sure to make your room as dark as possible to limit any light exposure, especially blue light exposure. So I would suggest either looking into blackout blinds or an eye mask, like you mentioned, Jeff, something that's going to help limit light exposure. And if you happen to live in a busy neighborhood or a household with a bunch of people in it, look into a pair of earplugs. Like, these are super cheap investment that you can make to just block out that noise. Another big thing that I really find helpful in terms of blocking out noise and just having an environment which is going to be conducive for sleep is to use either a fan or a white noise machine to help
Mhm.
drown out any noise. And also reserve your room, your bed, for two activities, which is sleep and sex, as you don't want to start associating your bed with stimulating activities like scrolling social media, doing work, answering emails, or other activities.
That's
And
fucking
so
true.
all these things, like, we have to realize that you need to set up, like, anything in life is your environment can make or break you. The people you surround yourself with can make or break you. All these things, your thoughts, your actions, your associations. So we have to think about the same. We have to think about it in the same manner when it comes to sleep.
I agree. Now, what are some supplements to round this out that people can do to help with sleep? I personally like 2 quarter E's, a Delta 8, and a scoop of cortisol by MPA subs before I go to bed. That's
Well,
usually my
that's
go-to.
cortisol is going to be one that I cover, my man. But when it comes down to, there's a hierarchy essentially. So when it comes to stress and sleep, there are certain supplements we can use to both help reduce stress and improve sleep. The reason why I'm hitting on stress is that's usually one of the biggest culprits. And that's why you actually hit on, think about what you just named: Cordy's, which is a cortisol reducing supplement, the
Cortisol.
cortisol, which is a cortisol reducing supplement, which I'll go through. These are all things to reduce stress. So one supplement that I found to be extremely effective in both myself and clients for stress reduction and sleep improvement is ashwagandha, which is also referred to, really what I'm going to go over is the literature on KSM 66, which is a trademarked version of ashwagandha, but they can be used interchangeably. So in a 2020 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study to evaluate the effects of ashwagandha extract on sleep quality in healthy adults, they found that when people took ashwagandha daily for 6 weeks, there was a 72% increase in self-reported sleep quality for the treatment group as compared to the placebo group. And so they use activity monitoring data essentially, and the treatment group that received the ashwagandha over the course of that 6 week study showed significant improvements in sleep efficiency, total sleep time, and sleep latency, and then also wake after sleep onset. And so they also looked at different indices of, like, how did this have downstream effects? Like, how did this improvement in or reduction in stress and improvement in sleep affect these people's lives? And what they found was that they showed better quality of life. They had better improvements in physical and psychological and environmental domains. And so this had all these different downstream cascades just from the implementation of one supplement. And this is because when we actually look at ashwagandha, and this is something I actually formulated many products during my years in the supplement industry with ashwagandha, it agonizes the GABA A receptor, which can have a calming effect. And so when we look at the actual the patented form, which is the KSM 66 form, it has been found to help with lowering stress and cortisol, improving body composition, improving our adaptations to training, and increasing testosterone levels. Now, the next thing that I like to pair with it, it's another sleep supplement or a calming supplement, is L-theanine. And L-theanine is a naturally occurring amino acid that's found in green tea, but it can be taken in supplement form because it's found in very small concentrations in green tea. And it's a great supplement for reducing stress and improving relaxation, and helps people cope with different types of stress, especially psychological stress. And when we look at the randomized controlled trials on L-theanine, they have shown that it causes a significant reduction in stress. And the research finds that those who take L-theanine see an improvement in sleep due to that reduction in stress. The next thing we're going to cover, not that this is the granddaddy supplement for sleep, but everyone's going to ask about this, and it's melatonin. And melatonin, we actually look at it, it's a naturally produced hormone that's produced by the pineal gland in the brain during biological night. And essentially what it does is it signals to our brain that it's biological night, so it sets us up for activities like sleep. And it can be used as a way to shift our circadian rhythm, aka our body clock. So it's great to use if you're suffering from jet lag, social jet lag, or do shift lag, and it will help with falling asleep and improving sleep efficiency. But at the same time, it's not something that it's not. I don't think of it as the best sleep supplement, although it's the most popular. Now, another sleep supplement or another helpful supplement that can help with sleep is magnesium. And magnesium, when we actually look at it, it's the second most common nutrient deficiency in developing countries and a crucial mineral, which many are deficient in and active individuals have an increased demand for. And so for those with a deficiency in magnesium, actually rectifying this deficiency can help with hundreds of processes, one of which being improved sleep. And so we have systematic reviews that have found that magnesium can help with sleep latency. And within that, when you take certain forms, so I usually recommend a specific form, which is magnesium bisglycinate. And the reason for that is it not only has a better bioavailability, meaning it has better absorption rate, but it can help with sleep as it's bonded to glycine, which helps with relaxation and sleep onset. Next, we have glycine, which a lot of people overlook, but it can help with promoting relaxation and decreased core body temperature, which can help with sleep quality. And then last but not least, one that you just named, it's cortisol, but the actual trademark name is phosphatidylserine. And
Mhm.
this is a supplement I love utilizing with clients. And it's great for reducing the stress response, which can help with improving your ability to get to sleep and stay asleep due to its cortisol modulating benefits. And this is most beneficial for when you have an overstimulation or activation of the HPA axis, as it helps to get you in a more parasympathetic state. And so when we actually look at research on phosphatidylserine, which is the active ingredient in cortisol, research has shown a decrease in serum and salivary cortisol production upon being stressed from utilizing phosphatidylserine. So it's a great supplement to utilize within your sleep habits. Also, if you're dealing with high levels of stress, it's a great supplement to use within those
Mhm.
high stress periods of your life. And it's something that I found great efficacy with both myself and my clients. And now, just to wrap up this entire podcast and put a bow on it, essentially regarding the insight, the information, advice made in this episode, there are so many benefits of improving your sleep, including better body composition, better workout performance, improved recovery from training and day-to-day life, improved hunger management and appetite regulation, increased energy levels, increased alertness and productivity, enhanced insulin sensitivity and nutrient partitioning, better immune system function, better mood and motivation, and a lesser chance of anxiety and depression, and overall a better quality of life. So I encourage you to take the tips and strategy laid out in this podcast and apply it to your own sleep routines, and then let us know how they helped. And as always, guys, please follow and subscribe to the show, and also share it on your Instagram or your social media profile so you can pay it forward the information that we've provided in this podcast. As always, guys, you can feel free to reach out to me at Brandon DeCruz _ or at bdecruzfitness@gmail.com. And Jeff, where can they find you, my man?
So I want to just caveat one little thing. I love smoking marijuana. It's my thing. I've enjoyed it for a long time, and a lot of people say they need that to sleep. And I'm here to tell you there's studies that show it impacts your sleep, not for the good. So I tend to cut that out before bed. If you guys are looking for something that helps with sleep, but it still does have some effects, but it will actually not as impact you as bad in terms of resting heart rate increase in HRV. It's the Delta 8 derivative of it. I actually have seen it on Aura where, say, I smoke an hour before bed, my resting heart rate will be 8 clicks higher than normal. My HR will be 15 clicks lower. If I do Delta 8, I'm 1 to 2, 3 RHR higher, and my HRV is maybe right around the same, if not 5 points lower.
Very interesting.
So it's some interesting stuff, but I think it's kind of dependent upon the person too. But I just want to point that out because a lot of people say, "Oh, I smoke up," and I'm like, "Yeah, it does calm you down, helps you relax." But it also does increase your resting heart rate. It also does cause you to go kind of sympathetic. There's just some things to it that right before bed's probably not the best time to use it. Maybe 3 hours before bed, wind down, then take your supplements and kind of cruise on through your night is how I personally do it. Just saying.
Yes, it's very similar in the effect to alcohol, where it has a sedative effect, but sedation does not equal quality sleep. And so I've seen that in the literature in terms of THC, because I had worked with a supplement company that was putting out a pure CBD product, but then we
Mhm.
also looked into the literature on THC, and it actually has some detrimental effects on sleep quality. I know that a lot of times people will tie habits that they have with a certain effect, so they feel sedated or they feel relaxed. Maybe they smoke mid-afternoon or after work to de-stress themselves, and they find that it's very calming for themselves, and it's a habit that they link. It's a habit stacking activity. So once work ends, they get a meal, they smoke, and they have a great effect from that. And then they try to essentially say, well, maybe, or they think to themselves, maybe that'll help me sleep at night. So they start utilizing it before bed. A lot of the times they're not looking at objective data in terms of what did my sleep look like you mentioned, what did my
Mhm.
sleep look like prior to trying this? And then what does the sleep look like on nights where all the only independent, extraneous factor that I changed or variable was just implementing that smoking prior to bed. And so it's really good that you're able to share that insight. So I appreciate that, my man.
Yeah, no, I really wanted to share that with people because that's one that a lot of people will talk about. I'm like, it's not necessarily true. But you all can find me Instagram, Jeff Unbreakable Black, and on YouTube under /Relentless Forever. The team and I are putting out some awesome videos and we really love doing it. So with that being said, catch y'all next week. B, have a good one,
Peace.
man. Peace.
You too, my man. Peace.